and the fact that everything that God has created was meant to make us all happy, universal destination of the goods of the earth. All of these become principles that help us mend whatever fractured relationship can, result in our various experiences in life. But essentially, the faith of religion is to provide this basic background of principles that describe what we are as a family and as people living together, called to live together in pursuit of our common good.
Yes. So the family is the basic fabric holding us together. If divisiveness should erupt, wait a minute, we're family. And you start with that as the basic principle.
That's what we are.
Thank you. What's your perspective, Bonnie?
So the purpose of religion is to unite people. And we, from the Baha'i perspective, believe that all the manifestations of God were sent to earth to bring unity, to build upon each other's the previous messages, and to bring new truth to mankind, as mankind matures to receive it. And we are possibly in an age where humankind is at its stage of adolescence, and we are seeing those tendencies playing out, the tendencies that are associated with adolescence and the uncertainties and others. Unfortunately, the narrative that is playing out is this: there are these corrosive narratives about the world is falling apart, and there's very little that can be done, and mankind cannot live in peace, and the conflict is going to be the nature of. And I think as the different religions and the faith groups and those that believe are really the ones that can bring about this sense of unity and a better understanding of what is the purpose of faith, what is the purpose of religion. The true nature of religion is to unite and to inspire their congregants, the individuals they work with, to rise to that higher level and to build communities, strong communities at the grassroots levels, communities that are resilient, that can withstand these fractures and the forces that are impacting societies that are causing those fractures. We also believe in the equality, and I think all religions speak of equality, but I think that equality has to be at all levels. The equality of women and men is a very important principle for us, and until we can realize that and advance the role of girls alongside that of boys, we will not have the united, the strong community that's required to mend those fractures. And the same thing goes for economic security as well. So this magic doesn't happen just automatically, just by saying that there's religion or faith in a community. We have to work, and we have to think very critically as to what are the structures that need to be re-examined. Because often we hear people say, oh, if only we were to educate the people. But I think some of the educational systems themselves are flawed and need re-examination. And again, we've heard it from world leaders just a little while ago, but others as well throughout the forum. The role of the media is one that we need to examine, and I think the media itself needs to do an examination as to the role it can provide alongside religious actors, because often it is religious media, too, that can sometimes perpetuate these narratives that I think we can overturn.
Gotcha. So ultimately it's, once again, looking at a set of values: unity, resilience in community, equality, and then looking at how those can be applied both at the personal level and at the structural level. Great, thank you. Then let's turn next to Sheikh.
All right. Bismillah. Well, the first thing I think it's important to, we talk about the terms like faith and often don't define them, and faith obviously has dictionary meanings. One of them is just belief without any proof. And there's a lot of people that's how they view faith. In fact, a lot of skeptics and secularists think the people of faith are simply They just have no proof and they're believing and it's irrational. But there's also reasonable faith. And I think most of our traditions actually are founded in reasonable faith. Everybody this morning got up with reasonable faith that they were going to make it to the Congress Center. We got on airplanes with reasonable faith that that pilot knew what he was doing, that Boeing knew what they were doing when they put it together. Basically, everything we're doing is faithful. I mean, we have immense faith. We had faith in our teachers when they told us that 5 times 5 is 25. We have faith in Klaus Schwab that he's a good organizer and this thing's all going to work out. So faith is just part of life. Reasonable faith, you know, there's a lot of unreasonable people. It's probably wise maybe to ask your spouse where you fare on that. But faith is just part of life, and how we bring faith into a type of reasonableness.
Yes.
In terms of healing the world has always been fractured. The Jewish tradition has tikkun olam, which is the idea of healing a fractured world. In the Islamic tradition, there's a verse in the Quran that says, do not corrupt the earth after we have made it whole for you. So humans have the capacity to actually create an immense amount of fraction. Now, fracture is interesting because we have a mathematical term, fraction. And if we want to add fractions, we have to find common denominators and bring those, that's the way we bring things together. So, and also to reduce, to get things down, a kind of Occam's razor, down to what are the fundamental problems on the planet. And if I was going to identify the fundamental problem, I would say it's arrogance. You know, human beings need to learn humility towards one another. And then I totally agree with His Eminence, the Cardinal, that family is at the root of it. And families are dysfunctional. Part of the reason why we have dysfunctional families is to learn how to live with people we don't agree with, right? I mean, everybody has the uncle that nobody wants to come to the holiday, but he still comes, and we kind of deal with it. And so that's part of just learning to live together. We are a human family, and having contempt for others is a major problem. And just, you know, in conclusion, our prophet said, none of you will enter paradise until you have faith. And he said, but you will not have faith until you love one another. He said, can I tell you something that if you practice it, you will come to love one another? And then he said, spread peace.
Wonderful. Let's turn to you now, Christiana. You have led tremendously complicated negotiations over incredibly important issues in our world and the sustainability of our world. How does faith fit into the work you do?
Well, you know, I come at this from the realization that we have not just reached planetary boundaries, we have overstepped them. And once you realize that, you begin to say, so what is the consequence of that? And you begin to understand that what I was taught as a young child, as a young woman, as the definition of the zero-sum game, in which what you win is my loss and what I win is your loss, frankly, doesn't have a place anymore. Because if you have reached and overstepped planetary boundaries, the fact is either we all win or we all lose together. Yeah. That's the new interpretation of zero-sum. And I think it was that understanding that we, frankly, all have to win together, which was at the basis of the development and the delivery of the Paris Agreement, where 195 nations came together, not just the governments, but all of the sectors. The spiritual leaders were there all the time. The scientists, there was not a fraction between science and religion. The business people were there, the NGOs were there, because we came to understand through a very difficult and complex dialogue that we're all in this one planet together. And that if there's anything that is going to move us forward, it's solidarity. So the main lesson, I think, that I had from that is as we rise, we converge. Because as we rise in our awareness of our deep humanity, of the divine in us, of the spiritual in us, of the best of the human in us, that's where we converge. That is what we have in common. And inasmuch as we reflect that and live with that, then solidarity comes as a natural next step. And then agreements are also a natural next step.
Yes. and agreements can stick, Paris Agreement, or they can start to, or some countries can drop out of these agreements. How did you engage faith communities in dealing with some of these kinds of complications?
The faith communities were there, actually, and were just, you know, I am truly grateful. Laudato Si, of course, is the most famous, but is not the only. The Baha'i community, the Muslim community, everybody was there, the Buddhist community, and truly supporting this process very, very deeply, in addition to all of the other communities and the other sectors. And that is why the Paris Agreement is a strong agreement. It cannot be fractured, to use your word, which I actually don't like. It cannot be questioned by one person sitting in any particular house, because it rose out of a higher consciousness of humanity. And therefore, it is not prone to electoral cycles. It will be with us for a much longer time. And it is, in fact, without wanting to minimize the difficulty of the Paris Agreement and of the world coming together on climate change, a job which we have not finished, by the way, and we must finish. But I very fundamentally believe that it was the first very successful effort that humanity made to truly address a global issue that needs a global solution. It is definitely not the last. And we know that we have biodiversity to deal with. We have poverty. We have water. We have migration. We have food security. The list goes on and on about global issues that we will all face in the 21st century. So the fact that we came to an agreement on climate, which we're still implementing, is, I think, humanity's gym. We're just at the gym of strengthening our muscle, of rising and converging with each other.
Right. Fabulous. Thank you. And Brian, so we are here at the World Economic Forum. Yes. In other words, there is a business perspective to faith as well, or there's at least some relationship between the two. Can you help us understand more about that?
Yeah, so the connection between faith